Hey, what's up, guys? It's Topics. I know this is a few days late, but I figured it would still be worth going over just because there's not very many Prot Warriors pushing high M plus right now. I'm still out here grinding, trying to get title on an off-meta tank. But yeah, for those of you interested, I'm going to go over the class changes for the 11.1 patch Season 2 for Prot Warrior and also the tier set, and just give my thoughts and kind of explain it a little bit. So, nice thing about Warriors, it's always at the bottom since Blizzard releases these notes alphabetically, and protection specifically is literally the very last spec covered. So I know I can always just scroll to the bottom and find it there. So first off, they say, we feel that Warriors are in a good place overall. However, there are a few places we'd like to make improvements to each spec and to the class as a whole. Warrior survivability in particular has been a weak point. And endurance training competing against powerful throughput nodes in the bottom of the warrior tree makes it difficult to talent into. So we're combining endurance training and reinforced plates to put the choice in the second tier, which has more choice against other utility and survival nodes, and thus be easier to spend points on. So I'm going to open this up in game and show you what this looks like. So what they're talking about is on this side, endurance training is right here, and reinforced plates is up here. So reinforced plates is just 10% armor. Endurance training is stamina increased by 10% if you spend both points. They're moving this endurance training and they're putting it up here with reinforced plates. They don't want people to have to spend points in the bottom tier here on a defensive ability like this. They want you to be able to spend it up here and then use it on potentially other stuff at the bottom. This isn't a problem with Prot. As you can see, like, I have reinforced plates and endurance training, and this is pretty standard. So I think that change was more for a DPS warrior. Just wanted to go over that, explain it a little bit more. So next, they are just talking about weapon specialization nodes. That doesn't really impact us that much. We're still going to have Avatar. Do not worry about that. Now, reinforced plates is a 2-point node that grants 5% stamina and 5% armor per point. So I just went over that. It'll be 2 points instead of a single point because they're trying to make it a choice node with the endurance training. Overwhelming Rage is now a 1-point talent that increases maximum rage by 30. We're probably still going to take this, but that could change. Two-handed weapon specialization for arms. Okay, this is arms. This is Fury. One-handed weapon specialization protection is now a 2-point talent that grants 3% damage and 2% leech per point. So we'll definitely take this. We'll probably double point this because it'll be 6% damage and 4% leech, which is really strong. So we'll definitely take both of these. Thunderous Words increases your bleed damage by 20% on affected targets, was 30. So a little bit of a 10% damage nerf on bleed. Cruel Strikes, Wild Strikes, and the weapon specialization nodes have been changed positions in the tree. This might affect your choice a little bit. Maybe like one choice might get affected. But obviously, people are going to have to test this on a PTR, see what builds work. Endurance training has been removed. That's just the one down here. Move my screen a little bit. That's just this one here. It's been moved to a choice node with reinforced plates up here. So you could say that it's removed, but in reality, they're just like repurposing the choice node in the second tier. And then Arms and Fury, we're going to skip that. So those warrior changes for Prot, they're not very impactful. It's mainly just moving stuff around the tree a little bit, and then the 10% bleed damage nerf on Thunderous Words. But that's only if you take Thunderous Roar, I believe, is what that bleed is from. And so since most Prot warriors don't take that, at least from what I've seen, it doesn't really matter that much. I prefer taking Champion's Spear because it's good for a tether. Like if you have ads spawning and you need to tether them to a location, this also serves that purpose. So this is almost like a damage plus utility ability built in one, as opposed to Thunderous Roar just being damage. So but let's move on to the spec-specific changes here. Protection warriors are currently constantly flooded with rage, which undermines rational defensive decision-making and encourages constant dumping of rage into ignore pain to maximize effectiveness. We're taking a pass at reducing protection's overall rage generation to make decisions on when and how to spend it more meaningfully without reducing protection warrior's ability to tank effectively. So I think this is, first of all, I think this is bad. And I think it's because, at least from how I feel when I play Prot Warrior, I don't feel like this is correct. Unfortunately, I feel like this decision is made based off of looking at maybe a lower pool of players, which is the majority of the player base, which is fine. Because they probably are overcapped on rage all the time, just because they don't need to dump as much of it into ignore pain because they're not taking as much incoming damage. When you're pushing high keys, 15s, 16s like me, and I'm taking so much damage, I'm constantly dumping my rage into ignore pain to try and keep that mitigation up. So I feel like, yes, you're probably overcapped on rage in lower keys, but in high keys, you definitely are not. In fact, I would say that I'm like rage drowning because I need more rage. If I had more rage, I could keep my ignore pain mitigation up more at more of a higher value, but that's just not the case. So, I don't think this is good for warriors pushing high M+, just because we're not going to have as much rage to dump into ignore pain to keep that mitigation up on dangerous big pulls. But let's read the rest because it kind of plays into it. Chance to reset the cooldown of Shield Slam from Devastator and Strategist reduced to 20 was 30, so you're just not going to get that many Shield Slam procs as you did before, but this is only 10%, so it's not really that noticeable. Out of 10 Devastator swings, you might have procced 3, now you're only going to proc 2, so I don't really think people will notice this. Impenetrable Wall no longer increases rage generation by Shield Slam. It's a little bit of a rage regen nerf there. Booming Voice causes Demoralizing Shout to generate 20 rage, 30. So this is when you would demo shout the mobs and you would get like 30 rage. Now you only get 20. But again, that's on a 45-second cooldown. So what this really means is you get 10 less rage every 45 seconds. You're not going to really notice that. Champion's Bulwark no longer increases the rage generated by shield charge. So you're just going to get the baseline rage there, but not extra rage. Blood Surge now causes damage from deep wounds to have a chance to generate 3 rage. So again, they're actually giving deep wounds a chance to generate 3 rage, and this isn't a nerf, they're just adding this. But this is going to be like more of a gradual rage generation, right? Because it's coming from deep wounds. It's not going to be like big chunks of rage that we would get currently. Violent Outburst has been rebuilt to easier understand and track progress towards the next outburst. Additional rage generated from Violent Outburst reduced to 50 was 100. The tracking I don't really care about. I don't think any Prot Warriors track this anyway. It's basically like a stack that once it builds to, I think, 8 or 10, you get like an outburst of rage, and you get increased damage from a couple abilities, but I don't think anyone was tracking this just because there wasn't really a point. It was kind of like a passive thing that happened in the background. But they're reducing the rage you get from this. Again, this is like maybe a nerf to like, I think this thing only procced like maybe once a minute, so not really noticeable either. Shield Wall cooldown reduced to 3 minutes was 3.5. So we're just going to have Shield Wall up even more. And I think the reason that they're doing this is because they know that the class is going to play a little bit slower due to the rage nerfs. And we may not have as much mitigation up all the time, so they wanted to give us a defensive more. Amount of damage ignored from each use of Ignore Pain increased by 30%. Colossal Might is no longer applied by Execute. So that's not a big deal. Prot Warriors did not use Execute that much. It's not like we were Execute spamming just because we needed to also dump Rage into mitigation, so we barely press Execute. So I'm going to talk about these last two ones because I think this summarizes what they're trying to do. So they want to give you a little bit more of a use of Shield Wall because they want your decision making to be important with this spec. And they're buffing the amount of damage that Ignore Pain ignores by 30%, which is actually quite a bit. So how the class is going to play is your rage regeneration is going to be slightly less. Now keep in mind, I went over these changes and it's really not that bad. Like I think, if you're someone that plays Prot Warrior a lot, you might notice this slightly. The rotation being a little slower just due to less procs, less rage being generated. However, when you dump rage into Ignore Pain, it's going to be bigger. you're going to get a bigger absorb of Ignore Pain. And then you're also going to have more shield walls to use. So if the class is feeling slower to play, you may be having a little bit of a harder time keeping mitigation up. That's okay, because when you do press Ignore Pain, it's bigger and you will have a little bit more shield wall uptime. So my summary for this is, I would not be surprised if this was a net neutral. Again, I think they're just trying to change the way the class feels a little bit, and making sure that when you do spend rage, you're thinking about, do I want to dump this into Ignore Pain, or am I fine and can I just use it on an offensive spender? I think they're just trying to promote that decision making more, because maybe in lower keys, like I said, people were just capped on rage 24/7 and they're just like spamming offensive abilities because they don't need any mitigation because the mobs aren't doing any damage. So I would not be surprised if this is a net neutral. I think that's hard to tell unless we test on PTR, but Prot Warrior's not dead. We're not cooked. I don't think there's any indication that we're necessarily going to be meta next season, but I definitely think we'll still be viable if this is a net neutral, just because the tanks that were bad kind of still look bad, and Prot Pally still looks really good. So if you enjoyed playing Prot Warrior this season, I don't think that will really change. So I'm definitely not a doomer on these changes. We'll go over the tier set quickly. So as you guys know, they're kind of taking the whole approach with all the tanks have kind of a similar 2-set. Healers, DPS, range, like depending on your role, you kind of have a similar 2-set with the proc. So like all tanks have luck of the draw. Basically, you're just, whenever you're in combat doing damage, you have a chance to proc this. And when you do, it just gives you 4 seconds of shield wall uptime, and it gives you 15% increased damage for 10 seconds. So I believe that there has been a little bit of speculation that I think 4 of the tanks have like a 1 proc per minute rate. One of them has like a 1.5, and I think Brewmaster has like 2 procs per minute that they're procking this luck of the draw. I'm not sure what the formula is, but that's just what I've heard. So basically once per minute, we're probably just going to get 4 seconds of shield wall. You can't really play around this. It's going to feel kind of bad if you press shield wall and then you proc this. I hope that it extends your shield wall and it isn't just like a bad overlap. If it extends your shield wall, I think that's fine. You press shield wall and then your 4 seconds procs, and now you have 12 seconds of shield wall instead of 8. I think that's fine, as long as the overlap doesn't cause them to kind of forget about one another. That would be fine. But yeah, so you might feel a little bit more sturdy once a minute in the middle of a pull, for literally no reason, because you proc this. The damage done is nice though, the damage proc. So I think they're trying to give tanks a little bit more damage. So that's what this is. And then the 4 set is luck of the draw. While luck of the draw is active, so basically once per minute, Shield Slam's chance to critically strike is increased by 50%, and its critical strike reduces the cooldown of shield charge by 6 seconds. So once per minute, luck of the draw is going to proc. You're going to get 4 seconds shield wall, 50% increased damage, and during that window, Shield Slam's crit is also increased, and the CDR on shield charge is also decreased. So I think shield charge's cooldown right now, it's like 38, 40 seconds, something like that. You're probably going to end up being able to use that every 20 to 30 seconds now instead. So you're going to get like 2 shield charges per pull, where before you'd probably only use 1. You do it either on pull or shortly after you pulled to build rage. So yeah, basically what this comes down to is this is all passive. You're not going to notice it. It's not going to change your gameplay. You're going to have a little bit more damage once a minute, and you might feel a little bit more sturdy. So this is definitely a net buff. Like this isn't bad. This is going to make you feel better. It's just not that exciting. That's all. And I'm not really concerned about the shield wall procking when you can't control it, as long as it adds on to the duration if you already have a shield wall going. So yeah, that's my take on the class changes for Warrior and spec changes for Prot, and then as well as the tier set. I'd give this overall a B-. I think the class spec changes are net neutral. I think the tier set, it's passive and it's good for us, but it's not going to change the way we play, and it's not like extremely exciting. But overall, B-. Still going to be playing Prot Warrior next season. Whether it's my main or I cook up an alt, I'm not sure, but I definitely will still be putting a lot of hours into Prot Warrior. Thank you guys for watching. Appreciate all the support, and see you in the next one.